Let's talk a bit about how the medium a story is told in can influence the delivery of information to the audience. To do this, we'll be using the Parselmouth reveal from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets as our case study. Here's the scene as described in the original book. A dueling club is arranged by the Hogwarts staff to teach the students some basic self-defense spells. Harry is chosen to demonstrate a defensive spell against Draco Malfoy, who summons a snake to attack him. The snake tries to attack a student named Justin, and Harry, having spoken to a snake in the previous book, approaches the snake and tells it to stop. It does so, allowing Professor Snape to dispose of it. Ron and Hermione then take Harry aside and both parties gain full clarity on the situation. Harry explains to them what he said, and they explain that he was speaking another language, which Harry makes clear he hadn't even realised he'd been doing. Like Harry, the reader has no idea Harry is speaking another language since, while the stories are told from a third-person perspective, aside from a few prologue scenes throughout the series, we never leave Harry's perspective across all 7 books. We experience the wizarding world the same way Harry does. In the film, however, the information is revealed in a different order because the perspective is less personal. Whereas the book displays Harry's words as he believes he is speaking them, the film displays them as they really are, in Parseltongue. We, the audience, do not know what Harry is saying, just as the rest of the characters don't. For all we know, Harry really was egging the snake on to go after Justin, and we don't know for sure that he wasn't until Ron and Hermione confront him about it and he tells them what he said. Rather than experiencing the events as Harry does, we are instead outside observers experiencing it the way the rest of the cast does, creating a very different scene, but one that ultimately conveys the same information by the end, albeit in a different order. In theory, this allows us to better understand when the rest of the school shuns Harry and thinks he's the heir of Slytherin, rather than thinking they're all idiotic dicks for believing something so obviously untrue. I mean, they are, but you get the idea. I don't really have a larger point to make here, I just find the way the scene is presented differently between the two mediums neat. But while we're here, let's also discuss the video game versions just for fun. The first game version of the scene I experienced was the PC version. Keep in mind, this game released in 2002 to coincide with the movie. Not only did most movie tie-in games use cutscenes primarily to contextualize and bridge the gap to the next level, but as a tie-in to the movie, it's easy to justify the mindset of, if you want more detail, watch the movie. So the game condenses the scene down quite a bit. For one, Justin is totally absent, so Harry becomes ostracized simply for being a Parseltongue, which is seen as a pretty big red flag in the canon anyway, so it still works. As a result, Harry is simply telling the snake to leave him alone. We hear it in English, but with a hissing overlay.
Leave me alone!
Everyone goes quiet, and Ron and Hermione fill us in on how the event is perceived by asking if Harry just hissed, suggesting that they didn't hear his words. Not that it really matters in this version because of the aforementioned absence of Justin, so it combines both versions by telling us what Harry's saying, with the hissing effect to imply Parseltongue, and using character reactions to confirm it. Given how they needed to quickly convey the information so they could advance to the next gameplay segment, this is an efficient and really interesting way of presenting the scene. Unfortunately, the others aren't nearly as interesting. The console version plays out just like the film, with Harry's words being heard only in Parseltongue. The difference is that him not realising he spoke another language isn't mentioned, and no one really seems to care aside from Ron and Hermione. The PS1 version uses Stephen Fry's narration with lines very similar to those in the book, with the characters speaking their own lines, except for Harry's key line.
"Leave him alone!" Harry shouted.
Because of the book-like presentation, it actually works. Part of it is not hearing it in Harry's voice. We hear it in the narrator's voice, which works to obscure the situation the same way the book does. The two Game Boy versions lack voice acting, so we again receive the information the way we do in the book. LEGO Harry Potter Years 1 to 4 is kind of a confusing mess that only makes sense if you already know what the scene is trying to convey, since this was back when LEGO games had the characters mime the plot instead of actually speaking. Malfoy summons the snake, it scares some students, Harry approaches and speaks in Parseltongue, which stands out due to the lack of other spoken languages, Ron and Hermione mime concern, and the snake comedically goes after Malfoy. Needless to say, this version isn't using the scene as a big dramatic moment like the rest try to. The DS and mobile version has text dialogue but still presents Harry's line in Parseltongue. It also has the player initiate it as a gameplay mechanic instead of it all being a cutscene, which is pretty cool. If you can think of any more instances of information being conveyed differently between mediums along these lines, please share your thoughts in the comments. And also share the hashtag #AzkabanForMalfoy, because that snake in the PS1 version is massive and a boss fight, which I feel should put Malfoy at the top of the list of suspects for heir of Slytherin. If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, then make sure to share it with your enemies so they can suffer along with you. Today's recommended playlist is the Harry Potter-a-thon by Dominic Noble, which discusses the changes in the HP films compared to the books.